teachers, today I want to share with you one of my most favourite authors, and it's an author by the name of Paul Jennings, and he's an Australian man who's written a whole range of different types of stories, but some of his are short stories, and you can find them in a whole range of different collections. And the particular story I want to share with you today is found in one of his collections called Unbearable. It can also be found in his anthology called Funniest Stories. And it's a story by the name of Licked. Licked is a story that I've used in the class from year 3 up to year 8. There are some short stories in the anthology that you might want to check, or any of the stories that you read from Paul Jennings. Just double check that they're age appropriate for your children. But Licked, anyone really from age 7 and up will be able to understand the actual story. Licked is about a boy named Andrew, and Andrew has a dad who is obsessed with flies, and he won't use spray cans or anything like that to kill the flies, so he goes around the house swiping and swatting like a mad thing. He's also obsessed with table manners, and one day Andrew overhears his mum and dad promise not to tell him off at the dinner table. So Andrew that night goes out of his way while the dad's boss is visiting for dinner to make dad crack. So he slurps his soup and he eats his chicken in all sorts of crazy ways, does everything he can to try and make dad crack, until finally he decides to pull out a secret weapon, which is a fly swat. And then Andrew starts to lick the fly swat in front of everybody at the table. At the end of the story, we find out that he wasn't actually eating dead flies or licking them off the fly swat like we thought he was. He was actually eating raisins and sultanas and licorice that he'd picked up at the dairy earlier that day. When I've finished reading the story, I tell the students that we've got a job to do, and that is to rewrite our own version of making dad crack. So the plan is always to write the part from where he sits down at the table up until the point where Andrew actually pulls out his secret weapon and starts to lick it. So the part in between where he's eating all the meal is the part that we focus on. The first thing I like to do is ask the children to brainstorm in groups the different meals that they have at home. So depending on the age level that you're teaching, you might want to do an entree, you might do a main and a dessert. We might just choose to do one or two of those. But I get the students to brainstorm all the different types of meals that they have, and then we share those ideas back. I always like to model a piece of writing for the children, regardless of if they're year 3, year 8. I still think that all children really benefit from seeing me think aloud and then write and process the actual writing myself on the board. So I like to tell them the story of a lasagna dish with mum and dad sitting around the table with Mr. Spinks, the boss, and Andrew, being me, pulls the lasagna dish towards me. And then I start to peel off the first layer of pasta and hold it high up above my head, and then start to lick it completely clean. So I've got like this page of A4 pasta in front of me that's completely sparkling clean. And when it's done, I just carefully place it back on top of the dish and then back into the middle of the table. And you can imagine that everybody goes crazy looking at it. When I model on the board, I like to emphasize a couple of points, because this story is written in the first person. So it's really important that when I'm modeling my work that I'm explaining how I'm maintaining it and staying in first person. And the other thing, the story is written in the present tense. So regardless of which tense you choose to do your actual version, I like to model in the present tense, but also show them how it could be possibly changed into the past, whichever's easier really. So the main course is a delicious lasagna prepared by Mum. I start all my stories that I do with this activity with the main course, or the dessert is, or the entree is, and that way it's a good way to just get the flow right of writing for the children. So make sure you start your sentence with that. The main course is a delicious lasagna prepared by Mum. And you can see I'm writing in the present tense, and the clue is that word is a delicious lasagna prepared by Mum. And I've also underlined the word Mum because in this context I'm referring to Mum as the name that I call her, not my mum being my mother, but by Mum. So that's the name I call her. And you can see the second sentence I've written, I've done it in a different colour, and I often do that with writing when I'm modelling with children or with students up to year 8, whichever age. It just shows and makes them really think about the different sentences that I'm using and where to put the full stops. She places the dish carefully in the centre of the table, and the word that indicates that we're in the present tense is this one here, places. I've tried to start my my sentence with a different word, and I know that she is referring to Mum because it's nice and close in terms of the sentences. Mr. Spinks looks impressed at the feast in front of him. Highlight the fact that we're still writing in the present tense and that I've started that sentence with a different word. So the first one I've got the, she, Mr. You can see I've started this sentence with before he has a chance to comment, I lean over and drag the whole dish of lasagna towards me. And I've used the word before he because it's mixing it up, and it also, he is referring to Mr. Spinks. We know that in the previous sentence I referred to him. Everyone sitting at the table stares at me. So tenses once again. I start to peel off the first layer of pasta carefully with my fingers. And I've underlined the word carefully because if you look back up here, I've actually used carefully before. So I like to highlight to the children that I don't want to repeat words over and over again. So I start to peel off the first layer of pasta carefully with my fingers. I'm just going to get rid of it and cross it out with my fingers. I hold the sheet up in front of me. Quite like using a whole range of simple sentences for the effect. Bits of meat sauce drip onto the white tablecloth. Dad starts to go red in the face as I begin to lick the layer clean. Obviously I haven't finished my modelling of the story or the paragraph and the main meal just as yet, but what I would also do is probably stop about this point and then get the children to count how many words I've used and really highlight the point that I haven't just rushed to the action straight away, but I've set the scene and spread it out and made sure that I've been really descriptive about what's actually happening at the table. And that's a really important point to make with your children. So often I give them a word limit, and that seems to help them think about how much they need to describe and to get to the action. I really hope I've given you an idea of how you can use this particular story in your classroom. I'd be really interested to hear of some other ideas or activities that you think this story could do. So if you can, post it on my Facebook page, any ideas or any examples of any work that you've done with the children in your class based on this particular activity. I'd be really interested to hear.